Hi and welcome to the final week of Research and Information Skills. This week I'd like to do a very brief course review. As far as I'm concerned, the PowerPoint speaks for itself, but I'd like to maybe make a few points about the journey we've taken. And my hope is that you've actually, taken at least some of the better aspects of the course away with you, that you can apply them to your studies. I could ask for nothing more. Anyway, to the point. From rather humble beginnings back in week one, we had a look at using Milo, and I'm hoping that most of you have a fairly keen level of skill in terms of using Milo. We looked at and had an overview of what information skills were and how they might actually be applicable in terms of your studies. Perhaps the key in week one was actually where to find information, so where to find different resources, and that was perhaps the first time we'd indicate how good the library is, and I would argue not only at UTAS but any university. From my experience of being in several universities, the library is not only a hub for information but a hub for personal contact, and particularly in the working rooms, you can work with your peers, etc. Beyond that, like I said, they're great places just to find information for what you need. In the second week, we had a look at the roles and limits of Google, and obviously the same for Wikipedia, and what the issues were with Wikipedia. We again reiterated and extended the ideas around the UTAS library. You guys got to do a few activities, and we also did a basic introduction to searching on the internet. For me, this is the start of the real work when we're looking at, okay, where do we find information, and then what do we start doing with it. Sorry, that was a pause for distraction. Someone's just come to the door. In week 3, we started to look at recording information, and we looked at bibliographies, we looked at reference lists and citations and referencing styles. We did some work on that front. You guys went down and collected some biographical information, or bibliographical information, sorry, slip of the tongue. And for me, like I said, that's probably one of the most important tasks that you actually start getting used to, collecting information about about the books and the material that you're actually finding, and beginning the process of acknowledgement, which most of you probably found quite difficult. But I'm hoping, like I said, it'll come in time, and that you become like the rest of us in academia. You come to do this sort of stuff almost by rote. It's just something you do each time. Week 4. For me was a crucial one, and perhaps the most important week, and I emphasised this at the time in the recording, that you start to evaluate information, you start to look at the quality of that information and whether you can actually use it in terms of your work, and particularly at university. And we looked at objective and subjective information and how they differ, one being more academic than the other, and then we looked at authoritative sources. And there was the authority test which we used, which asked questions like, where does the information come from, who's the audience, how's the information verified, and is it objective, and is it up to date? Basic questions, and my hope is that most of you got your head around that fairly quickly, and could ascertain or could measure bits of information against those 5 questions and come up with, I think, a fairly good guide to getting relevant information for university. We began looking at the search for answers in week 5. For me, this was I would have liked to have done a lot more if we'd had the time and the energy. Sadly, there's not necessarily, particularly on campus, there's not that many computer suites, so it's difficult to do. I'm thinking about putting in some more exercises for searching. I'm going to look at those over the holidays and perhaps start including those as options for the week's activities. I'd be interested in your feedback on that, if you could. Maybe write to me directly as the unit coordinator. In week 6, we started to look at academic conversations and what us academics do. And maybe to some extent it was self-evident, but I think it was, an important step in terms of you guys actually possibly becoming academics and finding out what you would do in a job like this. Week 7, we started the actual research. So we looked at writing an essay, we looked at the question analysis, and we looked at developing a research strategy. And this as a process was partly to do with you guys looking at how you can formulate an approach to research. So not just simply saying, well, look, I have this topic, I've got to go looking for it, but actually unpack a question, pick out the key terms, for instance, and then search out those terms and find information specifically and directly about those things. And hopefully that is the building blocks or the platform in which you can actually answer an essay question. In week 8, we looked at relevant information, and again we did the unpacking of essay questions. We looked at what the process is of conducting a literature review, and more importantly, we looked at how do we create a research plan, and we looked at generating a research plan, not only in your normal kind of working life, but also how do we do that in terms of the project that you guys had to undertake, and hopefully have just finished. In week 9, we looked at a research cycle. I looked at and certainly examined on campus about how we frame an issue, and how we would literally generate a research plan based on a specific question, and how we follow leads through. So in other words, we might use, for instance, the bibliography at the back of a book. We might use the authors that are mentioned in some of the chapters, or some of the ideas mentioned in a chapter, and also the possibility of reframing questions that possibly answers a question, but in a slightly different way than perhaps we initially thought. In week 10, we did critical reading. We looked at what is reading itself. We looked at the elements of critical reading, and also looked at some of the questions, not unlike the evaluative questions we did in week 4. We started to look at what are the questions when we read? What are the things we need to know about the text that we're engaged in? Obviously, in week 11, there was no lecture. We had or no tutorial. We had project work, which is kind of more or less, I wouldn't say a week off for you guys, but certainly a very different focus for the week. Last week we looked at knowledge, and we had a definition of knowledge. We looked at the notion of ideas, knowledge and problem solving as the three kind of relate. I probably could have done a lot more on problem solving, but didn't have the space or the time, sadly. And the bigger thing for me, which was the fact that ideas change the world, and I genuinely believe that someone can have a good idea, and it's not necessarily that the individual changes the world, because usually an idea is handed over to other people, or at least shared with other people, and those people then pick up that in earnest. So as a collective, we begin to actually generate change in the world, and I think that's a very positive thing. And obviously this week is just the review week. In closing, I want to say, look, a big thank you to all the students who are doing distance. It's been a privilege, as always. I hope you've kind of suffered these recordings in good grace. They have been difficult at times, particularly the middle 2 or 3 lectures. I was under a lot of kind of pressure in different respects, and I think the recording suffered as a result. I do apologise for that. But more than that, I hope you have a fantastic 2014, and obviously a very good end to 2013. I hope you get the results that you want, and that you can all continue into 2014 in terms of studies and in terms of hopefully your pathway into the vocation and the career that you want. Anyway, look, thanks for listening. It's really, as I say, it's been a real privilege. Have a good time. Thanks. Bye.